Hi, Instagram. How are you? I am being joined today by a different kind of person. Normally, not the sort of person that we speak about and we speak to, I should say. And we're just going to wait for her to come on. And there she is, Luli. She is an amazing health coach, and she is coming on to talk about we called it the new you, the new year, the new you. Hi guys, welcome. And she is coming on right now to share some of her wisdom. Health and about stress and anxiety and what we can do differently, not just on the mind and the psychology level, but also on the physical level, right? With our health and how much that affects us. Hi.
Hi,
How are
Jackie.
you?
How are you?
So nice to meet you.
You too. Thank you so much for having me
This
today.
is great. I love the blend of what we're talking about today, and I love your work. And I was looking through some of your delicious like recipes and things, and I was like, oh, I have to try that and that. It's amazing.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
where are you based?
I'm based in New York.
In New York.
Yes.
Okay. I'm in LA right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Do you live there or you're,
I live
you're...
there. Yeah. I live here.
Oh, amazing.
Yes, I was in New York and now I'm in LA and I'm from Australia. I'm all over the place. So,
I
and
can relate. I'm from Argentina, grew up in Miami, now I'm in New York,
there you go.
all over the place.
All over the place. We're a global community. Amazing. Amazing. So this is the first time I obviously coming from a completely different background here. And we're not completely, it's a big overlap. But I would, really would love to hear some of your wisdom, especially for some of my followers. We talk about obviously dating, we're focused on dating, but there's so much that comes up around your own mental and emotional health, stress, anxiety, all of this stuff, and how really the effect of all your relationships, the impact that we have on our relationships is dependent upon how we show up. And
100%.
how you show up is affected by whatever state you're in mentally, emotionally, physically, and stress, especially stress related wise. And I think we underestimate how much food and lifestyle affects that. And it's not something I talk about so much with my clients.
Hmm.
We focus much more on like inner blocks and subconscious blocks, and all of that is very, very important. I'm happy to also share some of that. But yeah, I would love to hear, like, I guess it's a big topic, and I don't know if you have a thought where to start, but essentially more about how we can really treat ourselves in a kinder way from a health perspective, so that we can actually show up and be more present and more open and available in relationships. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah, it fully makes sense. And I mean, I think it's a great place to start, even what you're just mentioning, the fact that the way that you feel, most importantly internally, like that's the way you show up to all areas of life. So
Right.
relationships, dating, work, family, everything. So the way that we eat, how we treat ourselves, how the relationship we have with our body, with ourselves, with everything, really, that's how, I, with the clients that I deal with, we really start from a place of like the inside out, because that's really like the root of
Yeah.
everything. And especially in dating, I think it's so crucial to approach dating from a place of having already your own strong foundation.
Yes. Yeah. So what gives us that foundation on a more physical? What can we do? Like, are there even things that we're doing that create more anxiety? Let's say.
Of course, of course. Like it could be anything from like the way that, the foods that you're eating, if you're not eating enough, or if you're eating too much, or if you're eating different qualities of foods that we're putting into our body, like that alone could lead to a lot of anxiety and stress. Our relationship with stress as well, like if we don't have like some coping mechanisms to deal with that, could also put a big strain on us. If we're not moving properly, if we're not sleeping properly, all of these different things have so much to do with how we approach stress, anxiety, and all of that. And at the end of the day, like that can prevent you from showing up as the best version of yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that with dating, there's a lot of anxiety that goes hand in hand anyway. And so if
Yeah.
you're already feeling anxious, a lot of people feel anxious or feel like nervous about, is he going to say yes, or is she going to say yes? And, and all of that, and whatever's going on in here, that's what I deal with, right? Is like, we also have a lot of power over how we show up here, you know, and our mindset in our how we approach something. Even like one of the biggest patterns I guess I see is that people feel so scared of rejection. They're
Yes.
so scared of rejection that they go out feeling guarded and try and protect themselves so they don't get rejected, but then they don't show up authentically. And then there's a disconnect because of that. And then guess what? Self-fulfilling prophecy, they get rejected because they're
Correct.
showing up guarded.
Exactly.
And they don't realize that it's themselves doing that. And they go, see, I always get rejected.
Right.
And so that's the sort of loop that I will help people out of, because even just reframing rejection, right? It's not really rejection of you as a person. It's rejection, the fact that you're not going to be my significant other in my life, And
Redirection.
yeah, rejection is redirection, rejection is protection, all these little, but when you really approach it that way, and you say, if I go out and this person says no, I'm totally fine. I'm calm. I'm not stressed. It's okay. If that person gets clarity before me, fine, you
For
know,
sure.
and it's
For
just
sure.
clarity. So I guess, but on a physical level, what spurs anxiety more? Like, let's say I'm already nervous and anxious. Like, what's the worst thing I could be doing beforehand a date and on a date that would make that anxiety worse?
So I think like this could be like twofold. One could be like on a physical level of like what we're ingesting, and the other one could be like on an emotional level of how we're showing up to the date. For example, if you're an anxious person, the one thing I would recommend not to do is to drink alcohol,
Mm.
because that I feel fuels even more anxiety, and the effects of afterwards, like let's say maybe like the day didn't go so well, you had maybe a drink or two, and like the effects of alcohol are not great to begin with. So that's the first thing I would say. If you're anxious, like maybe like try to like avoid that. And then the second part
Can I
is,
jump in there? Because
yeah.
that's so interesting. I would have thought, because alcohol's like a depressant, makes you more, like, kind of calms your nervous system while you're drinking, at least, that people would turn to that as a way of kind of easing their nerves. And it's not a stimulant drug, it's a depressant drug.
Right,
So
right.
why is that? So
I
curious.
could, yeah, no, I definitely see that point where you're coming from, and I'm sure a lot of people use it for
Not that
that as
I'm
well. And again, like,
advocating to
yeah,
just go out and drink. I'm just
I know.
saying.
No, but the I think the issue with alcohol is more like
Ah,
afterwards, like after the
ah,
day, the
interesting.
wind down effect from alcohol tends to fuel more of the anxiety that happens with it.
Right.
And then the other thing that I was gonna say in terms of showing up to a date to reduce anxiety and all of that is, like we mentioned, is working on your foundation. Because at least like this is how I approach dating, and like, you know, it was a journey to like really find my person and everything. But throughout those
Yeah.
years, I put all that energy into myself and healing my relationship with food, with my body, with anxiety, with everything, like from a holistic perspective, let's say. So when I met my person, then that moment, like I had the foundation built within myself, and I came to the date not really from a place of like, will he like me, or it's more like I love myself. Like, is this the right person for me? So you show up differently in that way, and that for me, like changing that perspective, is what calmed my anxiety and stress with dating.
Right. And so that idea of loving yourself first is the most important thing. Let's talk about some tips about how to do that, especially with food, because I think food is a symbol of, we can either treat our bodies and ourselves with food in a way that's not loving, or we can treat it in a way that is loving. And it's like nearly like a reflection of that in a sense. Would you say that? I mean,
Yeah,
you deal with this more than me in the
for
food
sure,
sense. Yeah, but
for
how
sure.
you do one thing is how you do everything. So that's what I tell my clients. It's like how you show up, even on my group calls. How you show up on the group call is how you're going to show up dating. So I'm like, if you can't show up authentically here, like with other people who are working on themselves and trying to better themselves, how can you show up authentically on a date where you really care about and the stakes are high? So how we do one thing is how we do everything, and we don't see things the way they are. We see things the way we are. So we have a lens that we look out of, right? And then we project that onto everything and everyone, and even food, I think,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Seeing it.
Food, exercise, everything, everything.
Right.
Um,
So what self-love with food versus, I guess we also were going to talk about breaking toxic patterns was one of the things we're going to discuss, how to break toxic patterns, and break free of those patterns in ourselves with a combination
mhm.
of health and the emotional and the psychological. What have you found to be successful in that, or helpful, very helpful?
Yeah. So I think that, we know like from like a science perspective that the food quality we eat has a direct impact on our gut, our brain. You know, they say our gut is like our second brain. So it has such a profound impact on a cellular level of like how we show up, that I think that's like the first part to like look
Mm,
inwards and start asking yourself the questions like, what is my relationship with food? Like, do I have a healthy relationship with food? What does a healthy relationship with food mean to me? Because it means something different to every person. So I think those are some of the questions that like you start to ask yourself, and you start to get like with a deep curiosity to go inwards. And then from there, you know, like what I recommend to my clients is, you know, protein, vegetables, like good quality proteins, good quality vegetables, healthy fats. We also want to have like a lot of fiber rich carbohydrates, because that also gives us fuel and energy. And creating that sort of balanced plate and having your meals, not skipping meals, you know, that sort of thing allows you already to set yourself up your days for success. Because if
mm.
you're eating well, you're going to the bathroom well, you feel really energized after a meal and not like sluggish, then that allows you, for example, to show up better for work. You start doing better with work. Then you start showing up better for yourself with dating. So I guess I would start with like a very curious lens to look into like your relationship with food, your body, and all of that, and start to set up a foundation that works for you. Because again, every person is different, and every person's meals, exercise routines, and everything will look different. But it's important to start learning to like see what works for you and create your own foundation for yourself.
Mm. So what do you do like with, you know, like the deprivation rage? You know, like people with, when I say that, I mean like I was just talking to we were actually at a meal and a bunch of people were talking about it. Any kind of diet or nutritional plan or whatever always feels like you're depriving yourself of something. And so people get angry. I don't want to do
Yep.
this anymore, right? Like, so how do you do that in a loving way? How do you look after yourself in a loving way if it means removing things that give you comfort or give you enjoyment? Just even, not even if it's an emotional crutch. Let's say it's just enjoyment. How do you advise people around that? Because I think that's where we all fall short a lot of the time, right? It's hard. It's
For
hard to resist those things.
sure. For sure. I grew up my whole life like doing diet after diet. I know the deprivation mentality and the restrictive mentality. And what I can say is that long term, that is not sustainable.
Right. Because
So
everyone says, stuff this. I want to eat what I want to eat. Right.
exactly. And then at the end of the cycle, you start eating more, and then you go back to the cycle. Oh, I have to deprive myself again to get to that point.
Correct.
So for me, it doesn't work. So I kind of, that it's not my, you know, a lot of people work that way. That's not my mentality of working, because I don't think it's sustainable long term. And I actually think it fuels a negative, uh, you know, relationship or cycle with your body and
Yeah.
yourself. So the way that I like to see it, instead of thinking of it as restriction, think about what you can add in instead, right? So let's say someone like wants to, for example, lose weight. Instead of thinking like, let me take out this, let me take out that, start focusing on like, what can you add in?
Mm,
Okay, can I add in more
I
vegetables to
like
my
that.
meal, more protein? Can I add more movement to my days? Can I add maybe 30 minutes or an hour more of sleep that night? Because, you know, sleep also has a lot to do with our hunger the next day. Can I start maybe adding in like learning how to understand my hunger cues? So in that way, when you're adding in, you're not feeling that sense of deprivation, restriction. I can't have this. When you tell someone you can't have this, usually it's the opposite effect. You want it more.
Right.
Or, you know, it's the same thing of like, in a sense, like when you feel rejected, you start like feeling like that feeling of like, but why? By this, and maybe you didn't even like the person. It's like the same with what we're talking
Food.
about.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Focus on what you can have, not what you can't have.
Yeah.
That's, I've often said that to when I've had tried different nutritional things. Stop telling me what I can't have. Tell me what I should eat. Give me options of like what I can eat that's delicious, you know? So I just
Exactly.
think, yeah, I think that someone's saying here about being mindful. That's nice. Yeah, being mindful, being present with your food, I think is
And
important. I mean, not too much. That sounds a little bit. That sounds very depriving, but it's important to eat. Yeah, exactly. But I think that yeah, being mindful of food. You know, who I don't know about you, but I definitely like sometimes just eat quickly in between things. You know, and don't even think about it.
Yeah,
But
I think we're all guilty of that. And I try my best to sit down, turn off TikTok or work or whatever it is, and just like eat. Because also when we're so like not thinking about our food and not being present with the food, we also tend to overeat more, or maybe eat when we're not hungry, or it's very hard to listen to your hunger cues when your brain is elsewhere and not in the moment.
yeah. So, okay, so let's talk about toxic patterns, breaking toxic. What would be like two more tips? One is we'll focus on what is good for you and bring that in as a positive. And what would be two more tips that you would give people to break any kind of toxic patterns?
Yeah, so before we get into that,
Yeah.
I want to ask you, like, what exactly do you mean by like toxic patterns? Or like maybe give like a few examples of like one or two so we can like direct it a little bit more, because there's so many kinds of toxic patterns.
Let's say I'm just trying to think of a common one where a woman, people pleasing, a woman will always just do what everyone else wants
Hmm.
and they won't put themselves first. That's a very,
Okay.
that can lead to toxicity. I think it's a very common one. A lot of women are people pleasers.
Yeah, well, I think in that case specifically, I feel like maybe you would know more because you have like the psychologist background and everything, but like from my perspective and what I can speak on is that for me, that sort of means like taking your power back. Like when
Yeah,
when
exactly.
you're constantly trying to please others, it's you're giving your power away constantly, 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 and not putting that energy towards yourself. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind, that if that were the case for me or anyone else, that I would strongly encourage someone to take their power back. And how do you do that? From my health and wellness perspective is, pouring all that love and energy to yourself, whether it's how you feed yourself, how you move, self-care practices, just showing yourself more love to build that self-confidence within yourself to bring that power back to
Right.
you.
That is what I focus on. I help people really dig deep. And I was just thinking, how would that express through food? It might also be giving power away to bad foods to make us feel better, right? Because there's an empty void in there with people pleasing. I don't feel I'm worthy of that power and that love, and so I will look to external, external places to get that, and that can sometimes be food as a
For
comfort, right? So it could be
sure.
junk food, fatty foods, definitely chocolate for sure. But really reaching out and filling that void, filling that hole, that lack of power, with a sense of comfort and nearly like it nearly gives you a sense of groundedness, like I'm here, I'm important when we eat junk.
Yeah, because it's a way of like taking your control over the situation with
Right,
maybe in a way that's not benefiting you or doing you justice in that moment.
right. So it's nearly like do you give your power away to food? Like
I mean, it's definitely a common theme that comes up. We have something called emotional eating where,
yeah,
you feel stressed, overwhelmed, or, maybe you don't have a good relationship with food and you turn to food as a coping mechanism. And instead of like really sitting there with your emotions and understanding, like, is it a physical hunger? Is it emotional hunger? You just reach for the food for comfort. And
yes.
it gives you a sense of control and groundedness for the moment, but then it keeps fueling that negative cycle as well.
Right, exactly. Especially control. I think that's a very big one. A lot of eating disorders, people with eating disorders will identify that as a root. That it's a coping mechanism to make them feel more in control. And so if you just deal with it on the food level, it doesn't really heal you because that's a symptom or that's a coping mechanism. I always believe when I worked as a psychologist, we don't rip away coping mechanisms from people. Ripping it away, that's why I really have a problem with these, like you said, the hard diets. They don't work because it's a coping mechanism you're ripping away, and we until we know other ways of coping, you can't just rip away coping mechanisms, whatever
Mhm.
they are. Even if, I mean, obviously the more harmful ones, like addictions and other things, they can really harm you in the process of using it. But even an addiction, whatever it is a coping mechanism. It's medicating something. And so what we really need to do, I think the common theme here under all of it is to really try to get to the root of it and see what is it medicating? What is this medicating? And I guess, yeah, what is it medicating? And usually that's a wound from our past, right? That's playing out in the present and it sits in the subconscious. And we need to be taught how to tune into it, how to tune into that wound from a higher place in ourselves. Meaning, I'll just dip a little into this because it's the area I deal with. But when we're in our adult mode, like I'm an adult, I'm present, I have a bigger perspective on things now. I'm aware of my strengths, my challenges, life in general, right? We're in a much stronger position. People don't realize that we are as adults. You no longer, you survived your childhood or whatever you got through. You survived it already. You're here. Yet we have these wounded parts that really hijack our present life from the subconscious because they're limiting beliefs and they're deep fears and deep feelings that are there that are valid. They're stored away and we don't deal with them. And they literally, until we connect to them, they will control our life. They will overtake relationships. They will overtake relationship with food, with people, with work, with how whether we feel worthy to even ask for a raise, with for sure for our dating, right? It hijacks everything, these belief systems that come out of a wound. And we have to be taught, and we can be taught, I teach it every day, how to tune into those wounds from an adult perspective, from the present adult perspective, and have a loving dialogue with that wound, just like it's a kid, a little kid. And when you can really truly find that part of you, and it's usually in your body, which is interesting because it comes back to the body. Our bodies store a lot of this stuff. And when we can find that wound and really dialogue with it and really be in touch with it and be present from our adult perspective, it will automatically start to heal. We don't have to do anything with it. Just creating that space of like, I'm curious about myself and I want to bring every part of myself into relationship with me. I want to have a connection with all the parts of myself. There's no part of myself that I find repulsive, that I don't want to connect with, that I'm pushing away and isolating inside. It's that isolation internally that ends up creating this hijack effect where it takes over. And so all I want to do, if you can just think of this as a concept, is I need to turn towards every aspect of myself, knowing that it's not all of me. It's not who I am. It's just a little part of me that was wounded or hurt. And it might not be pretty. It might be ugly. It might be sad. It might be terrified. It might be anxious. And what happens is the way we keep ourselves stuck is that we judge it. So the opposite of healing is the judgment. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I have that part of me. I don't want anyone else to know that I have that part of me. What's wrong with me? I'm such a loser. I'm an idiot. I'm messed up. Whatever it is, whatever your judgments are, that's what keeps us stuck. And I can't tell you that like 60-70% of the work with people that I work with is to remove that judgment. I mean, just to get rid of the judgment and go in with compassionate curiosity. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting that I do that. What's that about? Like, let me look at that because I want to bring everything into the light. And when I bring everything into the light, there's no darkness. There's no place to hide. Like I can kind of face all of myself knowing that I'm still good, right? I think deep down people don't believe they're good. We don't think we're good. We think we're wrong. We think things are bad. We think I did the wrong thing. Why do we always think we did the wrong thing? Because I don't feel good inside. But you are good. You are good. Like you're good, even if you do bad things and make bad decisions, right? The essence of people is that we're good, right? People have a soul. They're connected to God, a higher power. If you come from that perspective, that's definitely the perspective I work out of. And so you're good. It doesn't mean you're at your potential, but it means that your essence is good. And if you can see the parts of yourself and say, okay, this feels ugly, or it feels hard, or it feels, not where I want to be, but I'm going to really try and have compassion for that part of myself. And I'm going to understand what part it serves for me. It's every part of us serves, even the judgmental. Last night on my group call, we were talking about even the part of you that's judgmental, really, really, really judgmental, is usually there to protect you from something, right? That judgmental part. It's like it's trying to make you better by judging you, but it doesn't help. But it is trying to do good. Even the judgmental part that's negative is trying to do good. And so when we turn towards that and we say hi and we give it some love, guess what happens to it? It just dissolves. Yep. It dissolves, and you realize, oh my gosh, I really do have more mastery and power over my inner space and inner world than I realized. And that's for sure going to project into all my lifestyle choices and patterns and food and everything, but definitely relationships and dating.
For sure. I love what you just said. And there were a few things that you said actually that really resonated with me and also the work that I do. And it's the fact that you said like most clientele are dealing with like judgment, and that specific judgment is what also fuels such a negative self-talk within oneself.
Mm.
That's also something I deal with a lot to like improve body image and self-esteem, is to like start getting that curiosity and listening to the internal dialogue that you have with yourself, and notice if it's negative, notice what the words you're saying, and then within that also turn to compassion,
Mm.
which goes into what you were just saying
Yeah.
as well, that when you start dealing with that internal dialogue and that judgment with compassion, you slowly see it melting away, and that's when I almost feel like that's when your true essence is able to shine through.
Mm. Beautiful. And do you do that with with people with their eating?
Yes, of course, of course. So, when someone comes to me and they're trying to like heal their relationship with food or their body image, all that sort of thing, that's one of the things that we go through the most, is the internal dialogue with oneself, and also the dialogue that you have with food. For example, like if you're saying like, "Oh, this food is good, this food is bad," then it starts to create a skewed perspective
Yeah.
on food, which we want to have a more like neutral language towards food.
Aha. So making food good and bad is already
Yeah,
problematic.
like if you say, "Oh, I can't have the pasta, it's bad for you." Then when you have the pasta, what do you think is going to happen? It's just going to turn into guilt.
Yes. Right. 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 Beautiful. Yeah. Let's talk about body image. That's really important because at that when we talked before about toxic relationships, you can have a very toxic relationship with your own body image, and that projection onto your body is an extension of that. Sometimes that self-hatred, self-loathing, and maybe what we've been taught as kids, to adopt and internalize as negative belief systems that are obviously not true, but we really, really believe them. How do you work with that?
Yeah, so what you just mentioned is has to do with like also how I grew up with, like,
Mm.
I'm a 90s kid, and I think that the diet mentality was so ingrained in the culture at the time, and even still today you still feel it a lot. And also like the pressure of like, for some reason in the society I grew up with, also like there's a lot of pressure to look a certain way, and just it's always been there in the back of my mind. So that really created a negative perspective when it came to like my body image. And the way that I was able to like really break free from that and turned all that around was what we mentioned before, of taking my power back.
Mm.
So instead of like, growing up with that sort of like noise in your head, it was always about, oh, what is this person going to think of me? Oh, when I go to this social event, like, do I look good enough? Do I look skinny enough? Oh, when I'm dating this person, like, do you think I look skinny enough for the person? So instead
Yeah.
of like thinking that way, I was like, no, no, no. Like, I'm pouring this love and energy back to me. I need to work on loving myself, because if I don't love myself, it's going to be very hard for someone else to love me. And from there, all of my relationship with my body image started to really heal for the better, and get to a place where I feel very comfortable and confident and happy. And that's what I help with clients today as well. So really, like we mentioned before, is bringing that power back to yourself.
So, what was the most effective way for you, that you did that? Like, what worked for you in taking your power back? Like, how did you do that?
Yeah, so I think that for me personally, it had to do with creating, like I mentioned also before, like a foundation that felt good to me, that allowed me to show up as the
Mm.
best version of myself. I don't want to say every day, because obviously we have some days that it doesn't happen, but most of the days I would say. So that foundation for me was, learning to eat in a way for my body that works for me, that allows me to feel really amazing, but also allows me to enjoy a social life, because that's important to me, for example. That was one of the big things. Having a really healthy relationship with exercise, and using exercise as a way to make me feel really good and release endorphins, and have that sort of mentality around exercise, and not have it be to look a certain way, or to, burn off what I ate last night. So healing that as well. And then I think the third big thing that also helped me a lot, so it was food, exercise, and the third big thing was working on my self-esteem, and having and that internal dialogue with myself, and speaking to myself in a place from love, kindness, respect, and not putting myself down all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, that's the big one. That if I was thinking about what I would answer that, um, how do you get your power back and how do you build self-love? And I think that the most important thing is that we don't realize how we respond to ourselves. So it's not the impulse that we have or the feeling inside, it's the response that we have to ourselves. How we actually respond, whether it be like dismissing feelings, whether it be negative talk, whether it be not doing what we actually need, like I just need to have a nap, or I need to have a break, or I need to have, like, not listening to things inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things, I think, add to, that pattern, and that negative pattern, or the disempowered or empowered. And people really don't realize, until they realize, you start at some point, you get it and you're like, oh, it really matters what I feel and what I think. Like, it's not just like a nice thing I can ignore. If I ignore it, it's going to give me anxiety. And people don't realize that anxiety is a warning signal. It's like a flare. Hello, you're not paying attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's always something underneath the anxiety that wants your attention. And unfortunately, people are taught to just treat the anxiety at the anxiety level. Now, sometimes you have to do that, of course.
Right.
But if you just treat the anxiety at the anxiety level, you're not dealing with what it's trying to warn you or connect you
Yeah.
with underneath it.
Right. I always say it's like putting like a band-aid to the wound instead of like nurturing the wound
Exactly.
itself.
Yes, exactly. And so we want to be able to tune in and say, what do I really want right now? What do I really need? And you could do that with intuitive eating. Like, it's amazing how your stomach will tell you. It's just
Mm-hmm.
unbelievable. Like that. I don't know. I'd love to hear more. What I experience it as is more, when it's a yes, it's an expansion. And when it's a no, it's a constriction. Like, do I feel like salad or soup? And like, my stomach will do one thing towards one or the other. Like, or fish or meat. It'll
Mm-hmm.
be like, yes, fish, like it'll be open, or it'll be like, yes, meat, or no, it'll constrict. I don't know if there's another way to read yourself that way, but like, that's one of the ways I've found works for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've never honestly like related to that. Like I'm so happy you brought it up because it kind of like opened up my perspective to
Mm,
like hearing like what foods I want or don't want. For me, like I'm very like I love vegetables, I love protein, so like that's usually what I have on my plate anyways. But I love what you just mentioned about that, so I'm gonna adopt it and I'll let you know how it goes.
yeah, like
Um,
even the different proteins, like,
yeah,
because they has they're different different, different
for sure, for
nutrients. So,
sure. For sure. For me, like in terms of intuitive eating, is being really to understand like how I'm showing up to the meal. So like, am I hungry? Am I not hungry? Am I like ready to eat? So really like having that conversation with myself. And then what I like to do is I also like to check myself like halfway through the meal to see like how am I feeling? Like, am I getting full? Am I not? And then checking myself like when I'm around like 80% full, that's when like I like to stop because I don't like to reach 100 because then I'm like too full. So I like to stop right before then. And then if I'm still hungry, then I'll go for more. But the way that I approach intuitive eating for myself more than anything is that really paying attention to my hunger cues like before, during, and after the meal,
right.
and honoring that.
Yeah, and honoring that. Yeah, for sure. That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question whether your body will just tell you what it really needs, like what it really needs to eat. But even within protein and vegetables, I think there are maybe they're not. Maybe your body loves all protein and vegetables. But interestingly, and bonus points if you can do this intuitive tuning in on a date, right? If you're on a date and you can do it, because usually then you're hyper focused on your date.
For
Um,
sure.
but for dating, I think that's also like, if people are dating a lot, so how do you deal with that? Because a lot of dating happens in restaurants.
Yep.
What would be your tips for dating and eating and that kind of lifestyle?
Yeah. So it's actually interesting. Like for me, like going on dates and having food around like especially like the early dating period,
Yes.
like my stomach would constrict. Like it was hard for me to actually like eat during the date.
Wow.
Just because like nervous or
Nervous.
jitters or
Yeah.
just like excited about being there. But in terms of like eating, I personally like the way I eat at home is the way that I like to like eat at restaurants and the way that I like to eat on vacation. So it doesn't change that much for me. Like maybe like the portions sometimes change, or maybe certain like foods that like I wouldn't have at home would change if I'm eating at a restaurant. But for the most part, I follow the functional nutrition plate, which is having vegetables, protein, healthy fats, and fiber-rich carbs. So that's the same way that I would approach eating out in a restaurant on a date. With that said, sometimes, a lot of times, like maybe like the person on the date likes to order and you maybe don't have so much control in the moment.
Right.
But you could always practice like listening to your body and understanding like how hungry you are and when you need to stop or when you feel like you're ready to stop.
Right. That's a good one. I don't do that at all. But,
Yeah,
but
that's the one that I would recommend because that's the easiest one. Not easy because it takes practice to like listen to your body and have a conversation with yourself, but that's like when you don't have so much control over like what's being ordered on a date,
right.
that's an easier one to like bring forward.
Right. Good. Okay. I'm gonna adopt that one. I'm gonna try that one. I'm tuning in to see where if I'm 80% full. Is that what you said? And then
That's what works for me, but yes.
because you don't want to get to too full.
Yes, I don't want to leave a meal feeling like I'm
Gross.
too full or like I can't concentrate on work after or whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Okay. Okay. Amazing. Okay. Self-care. Self-care. Again, I have issues with this because such a buzzword, self-care. But what would be self-care practices that support both physical and emotional well-being? Meaning, again, my problem with self-care is there's a checklist and people go, yeah, check, I did self-care, right? Rather than, again, connect it to what you actually really need and want.
Mm-hmm.
Self-care is self-loving if it's connected to what you actually want and what you actually need. If it's just like random, I'm looking up some self-care list or I hear about something for self-care and I think, oh, that.
Oh, sorry, I can't hear you for some reason. Oh, there you go.
Sorry about
No
that.
worries.
So it's more about whether or not um, self-care is self-loving if I tune in and see what I actually need versus just some random list of what I think I should do because I've heard it's good for self-care,
Yeah.
right?
So the way that I personally approach self-care, like you said, it became like a buzzword that everyone was using, and people started to think that it was like spending a lot of money on getting like a fancy massage or a facial or whatever it is. And like for me, that's definitely not the case. Like the way that I view self-care is carving out a moment where I can be with myself and like you said, like listen to what you're wanting in that moment and honoring that. That's what really self-care means to me at least.
Mm.
So for me personally, like self-care could be movement. It could be going out for a walk or going to work out or whatever I'm craving in the moment. It could be taking a bath. It could be meditating. It could be reading my favorite book. It could be turning on a candle and journaling. It could be so many things, right? So it's really like you said about listening to what your body's asking for you. It could also be taking a nap. Like it could be anything. But what I want everyone who's listening to understand is that it does not have to be something fancy. It's just you being able to carve out a moment of like that's like an act of love to yourself.
Right. And I want to add to that, let it feel like an act of love, meaning I think what I was getting at before with the checklist is people just intellectually check it off. Yeah, I did this for self-care,
Mm.
check. And what they don't do is they're missing the point of the self-care, which is to viscerally feel that it feels good, meaning allow the pleasure in. Let yourself bathe in the pleasure of whatever you're doing and not feel guilty. That's number one, because guilt will kill that.
Yep.
And actually let yourself fill up because self-care is about filling up so that I'm full so I can continue giving in my life, whether I'm being of service to my family or to my friends or to my work or wherever I'm being of service in my life and giving. I need to stop and fill up so I can continue giving. That's really the mindset around it. And it doesn't work. You can do self-care and not fill
Yeah,
up. And,
for sure.
and that is the difference is whether I actually let it in. Do I let it feel good? And do I let myself actually viscerally feel the benefit and the pleasure of whatever self-care? Like if you go for a walk, you can go for like a power walk and not really notice your surroundings, or you can go for a walk and like breathe in the air. And it's like, I guess being mindful on some level, let the sun be on your face and feel nice and feel warm, just like enjoy the sun, whatever it is, like you want to actually enjoy it. and it's about really allowing that viscerally in, and I think that that changes your day when you can do that because you feel different.
I
And
love
it's all
that.
about the feeling and the visceral nature of things. We have to let things in and let it affect the body. I also say the same thing about affirmations. Affirmations just from the intellect mean nothing. They
Yep.
don't do anything. You have to actually embody it in the body. You have to say it in a way that resonates with your body. Let yourself actually slow down whatever mantra you want to say and say, how does that feel to say that thing? Right? And when you can do that, then it integrates it, you embody it, and it can become a reality that you want to attract, let's say, because you're putting yourself there and then you're actually saying it as if you were there. One of the modules I do in my course is where I get people to literally envisage the whole process from meeting someone to dating to it going easily, like then getting to eventually the chuppah, right? And being at their own wedding, and what does that feel like, and seeing the crowd and everyone's there to celebrate, and like some of them are really scared to let themselves feel that, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, that's interesting. So sometimes allowing yourself to go wherever you want to be internally also brings up internal resistance, right? Also brings up internal resistance, so that you can then diagnose and see where you're at, like see what's blocking you, because sometimes these subconscious blocks will get in the way and we don't even know that they're there. And why don't we know that they're there? Because we don't even let ourselves go to that level, right? To go to the level of where we want to be. We don't let ourselves drop into the place where I really want to be, because I'm scared to really let myself feel it, because what if it doesn't happen,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. So it comes down to like almost the fear of it not happening. I
Yes.
see.
It comes down to the fear of it not happening, and it's also about, it's not just that. It will also bring up the resistance.
Mm-hmm.
It will bring up what my deeper belief systems are, if um if I can't let myself go there. Like, oh, that's interesting. Again, compassionate curiosity. Why can't I let myself go there?
Right.
Right. Um, so yeah, so we want to be able to do that. We want to be able to just explore with that inner world, because all of this stuff will give you feedback and data about where am I at,
Mm-hmm.
where am I at, and what do I really want. So I would say to focus on what you do want. The anxiety is often the result of focusing on what we don't want, right? When
Mm-hmm.
we focus on what we don't want, we feel anxious. So shift it. Focus on what you do want. What
Yeah.
I want to focus on what I do want. I want to feel as if I already can have it, and then I become a vessel to actually receive that thing. Right? We don't manifest anything. I won't get on my anti-manifestation rant, but we don't manifest anything. God, higher power, delivers it, and we have to become a vessel for it. So there is truth to the fact that we can create our vessel to be receiving of it or not. That we can definitely block it. So we want to be able to get into the state where I'm really, really open to receiving whatever it is I want, including health,
Yep.
including happiness, including whatever it is. You still have to put in the effort. It's not enough just to do that. And that's more of a spiritual perspective of putting in that effort and surrendering the outcome, which I'm sure you operate from that too.
Yep.
Um, but essentially, yeah, being able to, the first step is letting yourself get there. And I think that people often will skip that step of really letting myself imagine and be in that place viscerally where I want to be, with dating, getting married, with health, with whatever it is, whatever you want, really to allow that and to be able to then deal with the blocks that come up that might be resistant to it. Because whatever the blocks are that are resistant will win.
Yep.
They'll win.
For sure.
They'll win. They're much stronger. They're there to protect you. They think that somehow there's a danger associated with what you want. There's a
Yeah.
danger. It's not good, and it will protect you. And so we want to be able to step out of the way. Step out of the way to get what we really want. And you have to do that inner mindset work, that inner subconscious work. The conscious work doesn't work because it's only 20% of our reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do a lot of conscious work and develop a lot of insight consciously. But if you don't do the deeper work, then at the subconscious level, what's really going on? What do I really feel? What do I really believe? And I'm really willing to look inside with compassion. If you don't do that, then there's a whole, like an iceberg. There's a whole lot under the surface that you're not aware of, and it's driving you. And so this is a month in the Jewish calendar, at least before Rosh Hashanah. It's Rosh Chodesh today, the beginning of the month before Rosh Hashanah, which is very powerful spiritually to get a lot of divine assistance to transform whatever we want to work on, whatever we want to grow in. This is the month. So if you've been thinking about health, and we've been thinking about growth in some way, contact Luli and get into shape in whatever way you want to get into shape, mentally, emotionally, physically, health-wise, whatever it is. And if you want to get married, this is also the time to break through of any rut that you're in. Any rut, this is a great month to shift it. I love Elul. I love Elul. It's the best. I know, it's the best. It's the best. It's really, really, really powerful. And I love that you work with the emotional level as well, because I think there's a lot of coaches that don't necessarily, like, or nutritionists or dietitians, whatever you want to call it. Like, there's a lot of people that just work on the physical, which is great. But like, I like that you really incorporate that.
Yeah, because it's very easy to like, here, have a meal plan, go. But if you're not working on what's really inside, like you said, like those blocks that are preventing you from like even being to like follow a plan or something, then it won't be progress long term. And we want something long term that's really internalized as your lifestyle, that becomes your foundation for being the best version of yourself. So I agree. It's very important to work on the emotional aspects as well, and not only on the physical.
Yes, beautiful, amazing. Well, you've given me what to think about, and I definitely
likewise.
I'm definitely going to check in with myself and see if I'm 80% full. That's especially if we're going into holiday season soon. But
yeah, that's a good tool for the holiday season.
I know. I don't know, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it. Like, I don't know, how do you get the strength to stop then? If there's like all these beautiful foods out, it's like so hard, you know.
It's a practice. It's a practice.
She's like, talk to me after.
Yeah, we can chat.
Okay, I just might. Okay, amazing, Luli. Thank you so much for the talk.
Thank you. And I had a pleasure today.
It was great. Beautiful. We'll be in touch.
You.
Thanks, guys.